So thank you everyone for joining us today. I'm going to turn on my camera, sorry. For our quarterly state GIS users meeting, my name is Arthur Buto. I'm the manager of the statewide GIS program here in the Office of Planning and Sustainable Development. We're keeping this meeting short. Normally it's a couple-hour meeting. This time it's only going to be an hour, a lunchtime hour. I know everybody's getting caught up from the holidays or transitioning to a new administration. Legislature just started, so a lot of things happening and people are busy. So we're just going to have a couple of presentations today, but I think a couple of interesting examples of how agencies are using GIS and our geo platform. So first, some housekeeping items. We are recording the meeting today, and we'll make it available on our YouTube site. I'll send out a link a little bit later when it's set up. If you have questions during the presentation, you have a couple of options. One is you can raise your Zoom hand, and at some point we'll recognize you and you can ask your question. Or you can also enter questions just in the chat. Joan De Los Santos, who most of you probably know in our program, is going to be monitoring the chat. So when there's an opportunity, we'll bring those questions to the attention of the presenters. And so that's a heads up to the presenters to take a breath every now and then. With that, we're going to move on to announcements. I'm not sure if Gretchen is on yet. Gretchen, are you there?
I am here.
Gretchen is from the local Esri office in Honolulu.
Okay, I'm gonna share the screen real quick. It's gonna be screen 3. Okay. And I have 2 announcements to make. Oh, give me 1 second. For some reason, PowerPoint doesn't want to show. Okay, new share will be this one. Okay. Can you see on my screen? I'm gonna be hosting an experience builder workshop in February. We're gonna have 2 offerings for the state users. The first one is gonna be Wednesday, February 15th. That's gonna be in person at the SB training room. We have a space limited. Arthur is gonna be sending an email with all the information and the link for registration. The good thing about in person is just giving you the chance to step out of your office and come here and focus on the training, polish some of those skills. On Thursday, February 23rd, we're gonna have the online version for those folks that either they cannot make it on time for the 15th or they prefer the online option. The workshop is going to run like previous workshop that has been invited on the past, like dashboards, Survey 1 to 3 Web GIS. In the morning, we're going to go a deep dive on the application with live demos and hands-on training for you to get your feet wet with the application. And the afternoon section is an opportunity to create your own application with your own data. If you have any questions, feel free to email me or email Arthur for further information. And I also want to share, we have some of the Esri MOOC happening in February and in May. We're gonna have going a space with geospatial. With this one, you're gonna learn some of the geospatial skill, geospatial analysis that you can like expand your skills. Is with ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Pro. These trainings are free. It only takes like 2 hours a week. The first one going space, going places with geospatial analysis starting February 1st. The second one is the cartography MOOC. This is like my favorite training. When the first came out, it helped me to migrate from ArcMap to ArcGIS Pro because they use ArcGIS Online and ArcGIS Pro. So this is a good training to take. It's really fun. It's just gonna fall in love with maps again. It's starting on February 22nd. And the last one is our newest MOOC. It is Transform Your AIC projects with GIS and BIM, and you will learn how to integrate BIM data with GIS and get the most of it. It's a 4-week, this is a short one, and it starts in May 3rd. And that's all I have.
Thanks, Gretchen. I do see a question in the chat. Sorry, Joan, I'm going to steal this one from you. Alexa's asking, will there be additional offerings for this workshop later in the year?
For the experience builder, we don't know yet. Usually we plan it like 1 or 2 weeks, 1 or 2 months before we get it. But if we got enough interest, we may able in a position to offer later in the year. And as well as other topics, other type of training that, for example, like the instructor-led Esri training don't have available.
Okay, thanks. Joan, I'm going to put you on the spot, ask you to give the announcements for the statewide GIS program.
Sure, I can do that. But I noticed there's another question in the chat, Arthur. Is there a cost to the ArcGIS Experience Builder experience?
Absolutely no. I'm going to be teaching the training here at Esri. Maybe the cost is parking if you decide to park in the building. But these are free training.
And then Brian is saying the cartography MOOC is legit. Highly recommend.
Yeah, it's the best one. I like it.
Okay. And then Arthur, you asked me to talk about the conference. Is that right?
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. So most of you know, or probably all of you know, that the 2023 user conference is going to be held in San Diego, July 10th to the 15th. And we wanted to let you know that as part of our enterprise agreement with Esri, we do have a limited number of free conference passes available, free registration passes available. So it entitles you to the registration, but of course not your hotel, your travel costs. So if you will be able to go, you're interested in going, and you will be able to get approval for your travel, hotel, per diem, etc. Contact me and I will give you the information that you'll need to register using one of those passes. And if you need information about the conference, this is how you can find out information about the conference. That's all.
Thanks. Just one quick thing. That benefit applies to state employees. So
yes,
consultants, sorry, you'll find your own dime. Okay, with that, we're going to move on quickly because it is a short meeting. Thanks, Joan. So our first presenter is going to be Royce Jones, who's going to talk about some of the work he's been doing for Office of Elections. Many of you know Royce. He's been a fixture in GIS in Hawaii for many, many years. And although he's been retired from Esri for a little while, he's still doing some GIS consulting for the state. So with that, I'll turn it over to you, Royce.
Great. Thanks, Arthur. I do have some slides here. I'm going to move into them quickly, talking about GIS and how it's learned, how it's used in elections. There's a lot to talk about. I'm going to give you a high-level summary of it here. You can see the main topics. I'm going to talk about specifically the 2022 election because that was the one that just finished, and now the legislature elected during that election is now just starting. And of course, before that, there was redistricting. So I'll give a summary of that and then talk about some specific maps and kind of just an overview of how we create them with GIS. So first, in general, GIS in elections. The Office of Elections is statewide, responsible for voter education, also the printing and counting of ballots, but they work closely with the 4 counties and each of their election divisions, because those divisions actually are responsible for individual voter registration. They mail out the ballots, they receive the ballots, they run the voter service centers, which is where you can go vote in person if you want, and they manage the places of deposit. We'll talk about those more a little bit later. But it really is a joint effort between both Office of Elections and the 4 counties. And voter registration, each county is responsible for the voters in their county and the voter registration, but it is a statewide system. So all 4 counties are using the same system. It's a system called Total Vote. So with that, if you really want to dig into it, the Office of Elections website has all kinds of information about all these things. I'm going to focus in more on just the GIS part and how I got involved in this. So I got involved first with elections, actually as part of the redistricting project. I was working for Esri, managing the Honolulu office. The Office of Elections is responsible for supporting the redistricting commission. The commission only meets every 10 years to do redistricting, but Office of Elections is responsible for providing them the support they need, secretarial support, and in this case, mapping support. You can see the graphic here. In 2001, we used a package called Autobound, which ran on top of, I don't know if you can read it there, ArcView 3X. Anybody remember that? Windows 95 and 98 NT and Crystal Report 6. But nonetheless, it had the set of tools that we needed to support the commission. They were able to do their redistricting and balance for our 4 districts, right? Because we got congressional, state senate, state house, and council districts. Council districts are county responsibilities, but both the congressional, state senate, and state house are the state redistricting commission. So 20 years ago, that's how I first got involved in learning about redistricting and elections. The commission did at that time share their data, because the data's redistricting, if you're not familiar with it, is based on census blocks, right? So population for every census block, adjusted for non-permanent residents, and then balancing out so that each district has roughly equal representation. So in 2001, the commission did share that census block data that they were using. So if anyone else had access to tools like this, they could come with their own plans. I'm not aware of anyone that did because it wasn't that simple, but the commission did. They came up with new plans and new districts, and that kept us going for another 10 years, after which time the internet had developed a lot more. Esri had done a lot more. We now had ArcGIS Online, and Esri had created a specific product online, Esri Redistricting Online, which the commission used then for their work, and it allowed for public access. Advocacy groups, anyone could create an account and use the same data, the same tools that the commission had. They could use that to draw up their own plans. And indeed, 10 years ago, as well as the recent time, people did, and that information was very helpful because they had the same data and the same tools. A lot of lines were changed based on input that was received from those maps that were created. So, but we tied in with ArcGIS Online. Not everybody wanted to make an account and create their own plan, but they wanted to see where are these new boundaries. And so that's where with ArcGIS Online, boom, put it out as a service, publish it as a layer, put a web map, right? So a lot of the information was made available using ArcGIS Online from the commission. And then once the plans were finalized, of course, we had to be prepared for the election. And we took a lot of those same maps and used them for the election. But if you recall, elections back then, it was before vote by mail. We had polling places, almost 300 of them statewide. Not many people realize, but there is what's called an electioneering area, a buffer around each polling place, 200-foot buffer where you're not allowed to campaign. And so in 2012, for the first time, we decided to make these available on GIS, the Office of Elections. They had been done in CAD. You can see on the left one of the CAD maps. And they were then circulated to each one of the polling places. And you can see it's a 200-foot buffer around the polling place itself. In this case, it's the cafeteria at Kaimuki High School, and the sidewalk to get to the cafeteria, and the parking to park to get to the sidewalk, and the driveway to drive in to get to the parking lot. So you outline that area, and then GIS, 200-foot buffer. So that was a great project, great use of GIS in 2012. For the first time, we took each of those, what had been individual CAD electioneering maps, and we got them online so that they would be available, and printed copies were still placed at each of the polling places. But we also had them online, right? Because you had ArcGIS Online, we had maps, we had apps, and it was very helpful and well received. Moving on a few more years, 2016. Again, so here's a map, here's a buffer. We're using ArcGIS Online a lot. And like a lot of things, you guys probably know, government does so much that the public isn't aware of. So much has to happen behind the scenes for things to work. When it doesn't work, then it makes the papers. But when it does work, there is so much that goes on. You guys know this. I'm preaching the choir here, but what a lot of people in the 2016 election, behind the scenes, the voter registration was being migrated from a legacy COBOL system to a newer address-based system. The old COBOL system basically used street segments. It didn't use individual address points. So behind the scenes in the 2016 election, two systems were run in parallel, the old legacy COBOL system and the new address-based system. They both worked, and the Office of Elections and the counties switched over then to this total vote address-based system. And they switched over just in time, because you may recall the 2018 election. If you're on Kauai, you certainly recall the flooding, particularly up on the North Shore in April of 2018. Well, now we had address points. The chart down there, a CPA is a clerk point address. The actual county clerks are responsible for maintaining these addresses. And it is an address point where voters are assigned. And so the VR count is the number of registered voters. And so we can see, Ala Eke Road, there are 12 address points with 19 voters. How about Kuhio Highway? Well, the entire Kuhio Highway was not impacted by the flood, but 181 address points were with 216 voters. So with this information, it really helped the Kauai County clerks decide, how are we going to reach these voters that have been cut off because of the flooding in Kauai? This was done with ArcGIS Online. It was not a publicly shared app, but it was an app created by the Office of Elections and shared with the Kauai County clerks so that they could come up with their plan on how to help these impacted voters. And then you may recall also, just a few months later, Kilauea erupted. And here we had some voters who totally lost their home, totally covered. Others were cut off. Once again, because we had point addresses, we could identify exactly who was impacted, how many voters were impacted. This was also ArcGIS Online internal that was shared, in this case, with the County of Hawaii Clerk's Office. So they could come up with their plan on how to help these impacted voters in the 2018 election. I did talk about all this at a state GIS user meeting back in 2018. I don't know if those slides are still around somewhere, but I did talk about this whole addressing system that we had just switched to. I also mentioned a brand new project that was just starting up at the time from NSGIC. You guys all know NSGIC. You may not be aware, they do have a specific geo-enabled elections, or GEE they call it. It was just getting started in 2018, and I talked about it briefly at the user group meeting. I continued to work with them because they were very interested. It turns out nationwide, Hawaii in 2018 was one of the bigger users of GIS in elections. And this is where they started surveying elections offices nationwide. And I helped them with reviewing some of those. And oh my gosh, it was amazing what some other states and counties were having to do to manage their elections. So the NSGIC project has continued to do more case studies. Our Hawaii one is there online. But if you're interested more specific in elections and not just GIS, I highly recommend the NSGIC site. They do have periodic seminars and workshops. So NSGIC, GEEE, but meanwhile, back here in Hawaii, we did have another round of redistricting. Wasn't that fun? In fact, that was almost exactly a year ago. I was in the depths of redistricting because if you were at all following what was happening there, you know the census results, the census numbers were delayed in their release, which then delayed the commission's ability. And then once again, of course, the Office of Elections provides the support to that commission And so that's where I was involved. We got it all done. We got the 2020-21 redistricting done, at which point Office of Elections and the county clerks, we need to create new precincts. So I've used that word a lot, precincts. Let me just quickly kind of tell you what a precinct is. The precincts are basically a ballot type. If you think we have basically 4 different legislative layers here, and why in fact you could think of them as GIS layers. There's the US House, which is 2 congressional districts. There's the State House, which is 51 legislative districts. State Senate, 25 legislative districts. And then the County Council, which Oahu has 9 legislative council districts. Big Island also has 9. Interestingly, Kauai and Maui do their elections countywide. So they do have internal boundaries, but in terms of a ballot and who people are voting for, it's all the same ballot type for anyone in Maui County for all the different county seats. But at any rate, so a precinct has a single ballot type, right? And so we need to figure out what those are. And I mentioned redistricting was done at census block level. Every census block is assigned to a US House, State Senate, County Council, which you could create an attribute called ballot type. Those of you who know GIS are thinking of this in your head and you're going, oh yeah, and then you use the dissolve command and dissolve that out to get the larger polygon then of all the census blocks that have the same ballot type. Let's give that a precinct number. And then occasionally they might divide those for reporting purposes, but basically every precinct has only one ballot type. That's the key thing. One precinct has one ballot type. You vote for one set of legislators and legislative districts. And we had to assign voters to these new districts because we had an election coming up real quick, right? Candidate filing becomes March 1st. Candidates want to know exactly where are these boundaries. So I know which district am I going to be running in because I live here. I know these, where exactly are these boundaries going to go? Election people need to know where are these boundaries going to go. And we, working with the counties, need to figure out the new precincts because they've all changed from the previous election. All voters, what do we got statewide? I forget now, 800,000, something like that. Every voter had to be assigned to their new precinct. And I was on ArcGIS Pro a lot, helping the counties and Office of Elections do all this. And we did get it done, and candidate filing started. And we had some maps, and I'll talk about those coming up next. But first, I don't know, I'm not watching the chat window. Were there any questions up to this point, Joan?
No questions so far.
Okay, I got a lot here, so I'll keep moving on. So the 3 different kind of map products I want to talk about, the election maps is the first one, both PDF and online versions, which is the case for a lot of the maps. If you're interested in seeing them, go to the Office of Elections website, go under resources, under maps, you'll see all kinds of maps, including these election maps I'm going to show you now, both PDF and interactive versions. So first, the PDF ones, you look at that and my gosh, it plots up in 3x4 large format on a plotter. That's what they are made to do. Copies are circulated around the state, I think to state libraries and various other places. Lots of copies are made of these maps. So that's why they're not in color. It's the same maps have been made for the 20 years that I've been involved in elections works. The maps have looked the same. And that's part of the thing. They don't want, people are used to a certain format. You don't want to change it. Actually, I would say there's one change because we're vote by mail now. We used to have to list every single polling place on this same map. Now, at least we don't have to do that. But at any rate, people are used to this format. I'm going to zoom in so you can just see a little bit more. We had to rely on symbology, right? What's a council district boundary? Where are the Senate, State House boundaries? We had to rely on symbology to do this and on labeling to do it. Quite complex. Previously to 2022 and the 2020 and earlier elections, it was all done in ArcMap. There was a bunch of custom scripts that were run. It was pretty complicated. For 2022, I did migrate it all to Pro. So all of these maps were made in ArcGIS Pro using tools that you guys who work with Pro, you'd be able to look at it and you'd know what I'm doing. You'd know how I make location maps because we did have to make detail for some areas, right? So for Big Island, there was a single map that showed all of the county of Hawaii, but also then a series of detail maps. So again, a lot of work in Pro, but pretty much standard ArcGIS Pro tools to create these maps for the county of Hawaii, for the county of Maui. We actually made two different island maps, one for Molokai and Lanai, and then the other Maui and Kaʻolave. And then of course the detail maps, similarly Kauai, and then of course Oahu, with 13 reference maps plus the island map, all kinds of detail in the table of contents, but again, standard Pro tools. Then we get the interactive maps, because there's the standard maps people have been used to for years, but we have the option for an interactive map where now we can use color. It's still complex because we've got a lot of different districts that overlap each other. So even with color, it's a pretty complex map. We do define a pop-up, right? Because this is ArcGIS Online. We define a pop-up so you can click anywhere and see what are the 4 legislative districts: State House, State Senate, County Council. So that's helpful. And some of you may be thinking, GIS, well, just let me turn a layer on and off. This was an insight for me as I was working with the public on some of these things. A lot of members of the public, the idea of turning layers on and off it's really complicated for them. So that's why instead for this tool, we created a series of tabs so we could have the word there. Actually, we don't have to say, turn this layer, click it on, click it off. They just click a tab. If you want to see State House districts only, you click that tab. State Senate districts only, you click that tab. And you see it still with the same color symbology, the same label symbology, but you only see the Senate districts. And then of course you can zoom in the map. Council districts, maybe you want, or maybe you're only interested in the congressional district. You can see all those boundaries. And then I did add to this one because not only have I found that the public's not always comfortable turning off layers, they're not always comfortable with this. What's that plus and the minus and that little house? And what's that little bullseye and the magnifying glass? And some people are, right? But some people aren't. So I added another tab called Tool Instructions, where I said you could click this button to zoom in, zoom out, and then use the search button to put in an address. So just to show you how this worked, I will put in an address. Again, I've just done a screen capture. We're not doing this live. I needed an address. I don't know if anyone actually lives at this address. I know a lot of people work there, but if someone did live there or actually anywhere in this green shaded area, they would be in precinct 2503, which if I then click my pop-up for the map, I can see precinct 2503. When it comes time for them to vote, they'll be voting for State House District 25, State Senate District 13, County Council District 6, and Congressional District 1. So this application was those same election maps. You could put in an address, go find out where things were. I'm going to pop this information up because I want to refer to it in a moment. But those are the election maps. Again, it was all created in Pro. And then, of course, we published out the data in order to make the online maps. But it was the same data that was used in Pro for those black and white PDFs. We then published out that same data for the online maps, just different symbology and so forth. So Joan, any questions on my election map before I move on?
No questions on the election map.
Okay, I'm trying to watch the time here. Okay, let's keep going. Find your ballot. This is a quick one. This used to be a lot of mapping to find your ballot. You could put in an address and find out. You'd see a map. You'd see your polling place. You could get directions how to drive to your polling place. Oh my gosh, there was so much GIS here. Now that we have vote by mail and we don't have 300 polling places, we just have a few voter service centers. The find your ballot is still there, but really it is now to find your ballot, not really your polling place, but find your ballot. So I put in that same address, and this is why I put the little snippet up in the corner. If I click the submit button, do I get the same answer? Whew, I did. All right. Precinct 25-3, if you're at this address, Congressional 1, Senate 13, House 25, and click here to view, you could click there and see the actual ballot that you will be sent in the mail. This was online as soon as the ballots were available and stayed up through the election. So finding your ballot, yes, you could do that using addresses. But really then, okay, I get my ballot in the mail now. How do I return my ballot, right? So Office of Elections responsible for voter education. The counties themselves, though, actually mail out those ballots, receive them back, and create the voter service centers where people can vote online. And those containers that you probably saw scattered around the island where you could deposit, if you didn't want to mail your ballot, you could deposit it in one of these containers called a place of deposit. Each county decides where they're going to put their voter service centers, where they're going to put their place of deposit, what the hours are going to be for the voter service center. They provide that to the Office of Elections, who then creates these products to educate the voters. First one being a PDF. Again, the PDF and online, that seems to be the duality we live in. So the PDF version, we had a map which was actually from ArcGIS Pro project to just do a screen capture, because the rest of this was all a Word doc. And then we just inserted that screen capture and did it basically because we want it county by county, right? Because again, this is where it's the 4 counties who are really responsible for this and making these decisions. And most of the voters, they're in a county. They're not interested in the other counties. They need to focus in on what do I need to know for my county. So there were 4 PDFs with the information for each of the counties. But we, as the Office of Elections, manage it as a statewide feature class for voter service centers, places of deposit, and the USPS facilities. So the PDFs, one for each county, but in terms of data management side, again, I took all this and put it into Pro for the 2022 election. This is just a screen capture of the Pro project. And then of course, in order to make the online maps, we shared that as a feature service, right? Remove the base map, of course. And then created a web map, configured the pop-ups, and then published it out as here's where you can return your voted ballot statewide. And then we have to do the county ones too, which I'll show you in a minute. Interestingly though, so we did have this application up statewide, and it was an ArcGIS online web mapping application. What people sometimes forget is these applications can be embedded in a website. You don't have to send a user to ArcGIS online. And here was an example. Civil Beat picked up this web mapping application, the one hosted on the Hawaii State GIS, the one the Office of Elections created, and they embedded it in their website with all the other voter information. And you could, if you went to the Civil Beat website, you could click on one of those points, the pop-up would come up, you could zoom in, everything worked the same, or if you wanted, you could expand it out into ArcGIS Online, right? But something to remember as you're thinking about how do we share maps, because a big part of GIS is helping other people understand them and use them, right? That's where in the old days we made paper maps. These days, everything's online and you really have a reach and you really can impact people. Keep in mind that you can embed your web mapping applications within a web page. So a lot of you guys probably already know that. Again, I'm probably preaching to the choir, but as I mentioned, the counties do want each their own. So we did create 4 separate web mapping applications, all from the same web map, right? We maintain the data statewide, but we created 4 different for each county web map applications. I'll show you the Kauai one. Again, the tabs, instead of click on and off layers, you could see all the election locations, or you want to go vote in person. Where are the voter service centers? You could click that tab. Oh, I just want to know the places of deposit. Where can I go drop my ballot off? Here's where they are. No, I'm happy to mail things. Where's the nearest? They probably already know, but in case they don't, we created that layer based on the information we got from the U.S. Postal Service. And of course, the pop-ups were there, right? They could click on any one and get the location and the hours when it's open. Likewise, say a voter service center, they could click and get the hours. Occasionally, those hours would change. The county would decide they needed to change the hours. They'd let us know. I'd open up Pro, I'd modify my table, republish the service, and that's all I had to do, right? It was great. I just republished the service, didn't have to change the web map, didn't have to change the web mapping application. Really powerful part I find in using ArcGIS Online is that ability to refresh the data itself without having to impact the web mapping application. So at any rate, that's the example for Kauai. I mentioned it is a statewide service. So those of you familiar with using, well, this is actually one of the classic map formats. But on the tab, you can say, where does the map start, right? And so I would do a custom configuration and I would just zoom into that county and then save that. So when any user opened up the Kauai County map, they would see exactly just Kauai County. And then as we got close to the election, we wanted to turn off the Postal Service ones. So that's where I go to content. Rather than delete all the Postal Service from my file geodatabase, all I did was turn it off in the service, right? Just in the configuration, I could turn that off. And then this is a helpful one too, I found. What about the tab itself? Within the organize, you can hide a tab. So you don't have to delete it. You can just hide a tab. So some quick things that I found useful in making these maps. Again, we made 4 of them, actually 5 if you want to count the statewide one. Did they get used? That's the final question. Well, here is 1 day's worth. This is the feature service itself. Request came in either from one of the 4 county applications or from the statewide. This is for 1 day, 195,000 map requests. In the voter service centers opened at 7 a.m., but you can see people were starting already at 4 a.m., 5 a.m., starting to hit these maps to find out where they could go vote. You can see the maximum 8 a.m., 22,000 requests in 1 hour. Pretty much stayed high all during the day. 7 p.m. when the voter service centers closed and the places of deposit closed, suddenly the demand closed. So yes, indeed, you do have reach with these online maps. They can really, really help. So I've given you a quick overview. I've talked plenty. I'm going to stop for one final set of questions. Anything? Joan?
Nope, I don't see
Anything in the
anything.
chat?
I don't see
Okay.
any hands raised, but I have a quick question.
Yes.
Royce, or maybe it's for Keenan. I'm not sure how long. I don't remember, Keenan, how long you've been there, but have you gotten any feedback from the public about these maps and availability of all this stuff?
So we do get some some questions, but they're mostly geared towards the PDF maps that Royce showed.
Yeah,
People,
a lot of people still go to those PDF maps. Yeah.
yeah, they still pay, over $20 for them, but usually in most cases their questions can be answered by the interactive maps, because those are just so detailed. But a lot of people still prefer the printed version. But yeah, otherwise not that many. Maybe a dozen at most since redistricting.
Okay, that's interesting. But I was actually asking more about, did people comment on they like this online access or not, or they had difficulty? Any comments like that or any feedback like that?
No, not really. Not really, to be honest, not from the public at least.
Okay, that's probably a good thing. It means they weren't complaining.
They used them, it worked. I mean, we can see, it's like, wow. Yeah. Okay, well, that's all I've got. So thank you very much for your time and thanks for inviting me to share. Arthur?
We've got some nice compliments, Royce, in the chat. So
Thanks, Royce. Yeah, that was a lot there. Really kind of hurt my head.
Well, Royce, I have a question. I was thinking, do we have statistics? How many people used the site?
Well, we know how many requests were made of the map. So a user takes the map and then pans the map, that's a request. How many individual users, we don't know, because I don't know, I didn't put any kind of Google, I don't even know if you can do that with ArcGIS Online. Maybe Gretchen knows. Actual individual users, I don't know how to track those. I only know the requests that come in, how to track those.
Yeah, visits, statistics
Todd's on
on
here
the web.
too.
we have some Google tracking on our. Oh, but you weren't using our services. You were using the ArcGIS Online services, right?
It was ArcGIS Online, yeah.
Yeah, I was gonna say we have some tracking on our services, but So that wouldn't have done it.
Yeah, no. But that's where something they could look at in the future if you know, if Keenan Office of Elections wanted some kind of management on that. To publish it through you guys. But
We have a
It- it-
question as to whether there's been any gerrymandering issues in Hawaii.
I guess that would probably depend on who you ask, but no, there haven't been. I mean, nothing's been gone to court. So, yeah, I mean, there's plenty of people that don't like lines that were drawn. Right, but that's the nature of it. Nobody's going to like everything. Yeah, I mean, that's what it was really interesting to see the other plans that people submit, because everybody got their own idea. You might think, oh, the commission comes up with their plan and then the public comes up with theirs and it's going to be different. No, there was like 12 different public maps for the districts on the Big Island. And they all had different ideas for what the best public map was, right? So that's where the commission would look at all 12 of those and kind of say, oh, this makes sense. Because usually each of those 12, the person had a certain area that they were trying to optimize. They wanted to optimize Ka'u, they wanted to optimize around Kona, right? So the commission would then look at all of those, and they did change some of their lines based on that kind of more local feedback. But yeah, it is interesting to see the variety that you get, and nobody's ever happy with the final one, right? I mean, even with a commission, not everybody agrees, but that's the process, right? Not everybody's happy with legislation. People vote for it, people vote against it. So, but yeah, nothing, no gerrymander was challenged in court.
Okay, well, thank you again, Royce, and we're
Yep.
going to move along because we're
Yeah, sorry.
on time. Always interesting to hear from you. Next, we'll hear from Jenna Masters from DOFAW Forestry and Wildlife, who's been using one of the newer applications in our online platform called the Hub. Some of you may have heard of that. Jenna?
Thanks, Arthur. I'm definitely not a GIS expert. I actually spend most of my time out in the field doing invasive species control and ecosystem management. So thanks for having me here today. Let me see if I can share my screen with you here. I'll do screen one. All right, can everybody see that? I think so.
Yep.
Okay, so no, I don't want to turn that on. Okay. So we are working to control a invasive species.
Sorry to interrupt, Jenna. We're seeing your presenter screen.
Oh no,
Sorry.
maybe I don't even know how to get it off the presenter screen here. Let's just do a new share here.
Can you share? Yeah, can you share your other screen?
I've got I'll share the screen that I'm with you. Oh, here, wait, maybe just a PowerPoint. How's that?
No, we're still seeing your presenter view.
Okay, let me see here. Maybe we'll just view and normal. Anybody got any suggestions here?
When you click on share screen, does it give you a
Todd
on which share?
Kingman
screen?
mentions under display settings to change your note screen.
Under display settings.
Todd,
Hmm.
maybe you can unmute.
Oh yeah, hi. Yeah, when you are presenting up at the and you go into presentation mode.
Is that the slideshow mode?
Yeah, slideshow mode.
Mm-hmm. Oh, use prevent center view. Okay, let's see here. I unclicked it. How about now?
Click the little icon in the bottom right corner next to the minus magnifier. So over to the left a little more, right there.
See.
Oh, no, sorry.
Ooh, that would be such a difficult journey.
You might need to check the use presenter view again and then click on that.
I think, Jenna, if you go now to share screen again, you'll see the screen with just your PowerPoint on it. That's what I had to do. Go to share screen again, and you'll see an example that's just your PowerPoint.
Okay, maybe this guy.
And then share that one. Hey,
How's that working?
That's it.
Looks good.
Okay, we'll see if it works.
Thanks.
So we are working to control the mule's foot fern, Angiopteris evicta. And so this is a really collaborative branch-wide effort to empower volunteers to map and control this invasive species across the landscape. So some of our project parts, we do a lot of volunteer recruitment. I say it's very collaborative because we work with all sections, including Arthur, the GIS guys. We work with the forestry managers to get those permits and those waivers signed. We do a lot of ArcGIS online and a lot of apps from that. And I found that virtual meetings and an in-person demo on actually how to kill these ferns have been really helpful. We do a lot of data collection on field maps, and then a lot of monthly reporting. We like to use a lot of Survey 123. So I guess I'll just start off kind of from the basics with volunteer recruitment. We use a lot of different programs here. To get a lot of our recruitment, because it's a very specialized project, and like how Royce was saying, not everybody is that apt to like turning on and off layers and taking points and data. It can be a little bit difficult for people. I'll recruit volunteers that have come out with us in the past. And if I'm still looking for some, we go onto our Instagram and I'll recruit from there as well. What you're kind of seeing on the right hand of the screen is our I Volunteer page, where we recruit most of our volunteers. Here I'll formulate a list of people who want to participate in the project, and then we kind of start off from there. Once we get enough people, we start thinking about permits and waivers. And so now we start going into e-sign, which is what we use at the state of Hawaii, to fill out these kind of online permits. And this will allow them to access areas that will be shown on the map, and then also apply herbicide or use manual control techniques on these invasive ferns. So yeah, once it goes to e-sign, we create a template, and then once that gets approval from your forestry managers and your branch managers, then it'll go to your volunteers from signatures, and then these have to be with them during the time of application. We use a lot of ArcGIS online products, and so the hub has been really useful because it's kind of your go-to to get everything in one place. So once we get all of our permits done, I nicely talked to Christine and Arthur and get them to get everybody community logins so they can access our hub page. So the hub page is actually open to the public, and the map is open to the public, as well as some of the training story maps, but not all the features are open to the public. And we actually have to invite the users into our community so they can view our initiative. So once you get onto the hub page, and I probably won't do a live demo of the hub page, but there will be an address within the presentation later if anybody wants to check it out. It's really great because it's very user friendly, especially for someone like me whose background is not in GIS. You know, it's kind of a plug and play, drop down menus, and select. So the gallery and resources tabs have been really amazing for me, where I can then host online story maps. So similar to the ones Royce had earlier, you'll have different tabs, and this is where people can learn to become a volunteer, or how to actually apply herbicide or do manual control techniques. Because a lot of this genesis started during COVID, when we actually weren't able to take out volunteers, and people were doing a lot of recreating in the forest, and they wanted to help out in different ways, but they just didn't have the ability to do so. So that's kind of when this started, and we started making this entire project. So you can also navigate to other things on the hub page, like resources like, you know, lookalike species or how-to manuals or different training guides through story maps. So yeah, we host everything on our hub page, and it's kind of the one-stop shop for our volunteers. Another great thing about the hub page, it does host a real-time interactive map with different layers and legends. And so this is where people start to get into a little bit of trouble, and we actually start to train them on how to become natural resource managers as a volunteer. So they'll be able to see this data, right? So when we started off with the Angiopteris project, there was a drone mapping of the entire Ko'olau mountain range. And from that, we've got points of Angiopteris that span that entire landscape. And with that data, before we released it to our volunteers, we started to make polygons of no-go areas you can kind of see in the red. We also started to pick out points that were incorrectly identified Angiopteris evicta. So those are like things that you don't want to kill. I try to make it as easy as possible for the volunteers. Red is usually a no-go or don't kill. Green is like, it's a good to go. You can find it. On top of that, we were able to put in the Na'alahele trail systems. So that's kind of public access for people to get to these forest reserve lands. We also put in reserves. So in those thick black lines, that's actually the shape of the forest reserve and or natural area reserve that you can go into. The difference between the green and the light green is we had some strategy planning meetings on which areas were the nicest habitat, and we deemed those C1s, conservation 1 zones. So we encourage the volunteers to visit the dark green, then the light green. The forest reserve will extend into non-green at all, which is the C3 area, which is kind of non-native dominant, not suitable for endangered species habitat. So a lot going on in these maps. And so it's super fun to watch people go and take points. I was gonna do like a little hub demo, but I think we'll skip that. You can get this website. And if you wanna become a community member to see all the information, we can do that as well. So once we got everybody signed up, everybody's taken their training. They know what Angiopteris is, they're ready to kill it. We actually give them access to field maps. And so they can use their community login and download the Esri or ArcGIS field maps application to do their data collection. So this is an actual point that somebody has taken during the volunteer service project, right? And it's really great because the volunteers can all see each other's points. So some people may not want to kill anything. They might just want to go out and map stuff, but this enables other volunteers to look at the map because it's updated on real time. And then they can actually design their own day or maybe which hike they want to go to based on if they feel like going out to control Angiopteris or not. It's really great because I get to take all the information. So I know who's taken it. I know what forest reserve they're in. I know what size the population is. They can take notes and they can also add photos. So this photo here kind of in the center right is an actual picture of Angiopteris that somebody found, controlled, took a picture of, sent me the data. And so that's been kind of fun as well. Getting into the field maps has been a challenge for some people, but once you kind of talk them through it, they're able to really start running with the project. And so on the right, you can kind of see just like that was what the interface kind of looks like on your cell phone. So everybody in this project is required to have a cell phone, a smartphone that they can take data on. You can use it offline, which is super impressive because a lot of times when you're in the mountains, you really don't have a lot of reception. So you can take the area offline, you can add your data, and then when you get back into service, you can turn it back on and it'll sync all the points up and you'll see, everybody will see your data. And then we just have the field maps. We used to use Collector, which is the old version of field maps, I'm going to call it. But that's kind of just a working screen of what field maps looks like as you're starting to design these projects. And then kind of finally, we do a lot of monthly reporting. And so we use a lot of Esri products for this. We have a survey 123 that goes out monthly where the volunteers can, update me on what they've done, especially if they don't capture that in the GIS. And then to my forestry manager, we end up giving him a map with all the points that were collected that month. Every reserve that people hit, how many were in each reserve, what the population types were, and even how much herbicide they applied to each individual plant. Some of the challenges and the mitigations that we've run into, because this is kind of just coming out of its beta volunteer working. Not a lot of people are doing this, I think, right now. Is volunteer management is always a challenge. Coloring inside the lines is what I'm calling it. The lines are clearly outlined, but you can tell people want to go outside the boundaries. And we have to, I found that having a virtual meeting to just discuss the importance of staying within state boundaries has really helped with that. The monthly reporting, I have to follow up with a lot of people. Not everybody is so great at submitting their monthly reports. Incomplete data collection, and that will happen when you're taking points online. And so I found that I have included more drop-down menus as well as required fields. So for them to actually take a point, they have to fill in this data for me. The gear return and pickup, that's always a challenge because we should do sign out sheets, as well as every 6 months we'll have like a new recruitment of volunteers. And so some people will return their materials, other people you might have to track down to get those. So another big challenge is staff time constraints and project management, mostly because, you know, we're doing so many different things. I'm not necessarily an office person, not in the office all the time. So it does take some time to quality control all the data, and then also set up times for people to pick up gear, stuff like that. And then I'm finding now that we're getting a lot more dedicated reoccurring volunteers. I set my max at 30 right now because we're kind of just in the testing of the waters here. But I probably have about 10 to 15 that are pretty dedicated and reoccurring. And this is great because they need less training and then they provide better data. So I know that was a lot in a nutshell, but that is pretty much all I've got. And I guess I could open it up for questions. I know we're running a little bit behind on time.
Oh, that's great, Jenna. Thanks. I have a question while we wait to see if other people have questions. You mentioned way back about doing drone imagery to identify where the Angiopteris was. Did you use some kind of imagery analysis software to do that?
Yeah, so that was actually part of another grant. They used Real Mapping Hawaii, and I believe it was a fixed wing drone that flew fixed points over it. And so what it did is it took a picture of each area, then stitched it together. And so I think the original idea was to use kind of like an AI to determine the difference between Angiopteris, hapu'u, and other tree ferns that might be out there. But they actually had to contract out, I think, KMWP, so the Ko'olau Mountain Watershed Partnership, initially started analyzing a lot of that data during COVID because nobody was really allowed to come in and go out into the field. But they ended up contracting it out to, I think, Forestry Solutions on the Big Island. So somebody actually had to go through each image and identify the plant. But what I'm telling my volunteers now, and this is why I'm really amped on the photo aspect of it, is like the more pictures you take, the more photos that we'll have and the closer that we could get to doing something like this artificial intelligence choosing out your ferns for you. Because to get that kind of AI, you need like millions of images so that it can overlap and reference them.
Great, thanks.
Gretchen asked for a link to the hub page. If you can put that in the chat, if possible.
Let's see if I can get it in here.
Okay, while you're doing that, for those that aren't familiar with the hub, I think of it as like a website builder. I'm sure, I mean, there's a lot more complexity to it than that, but think of it as a website builder. And as Jenna mentioned, you know, that's a place where you can put all your content that's related to your particular initiative or project, sort of all in one place. Doesn't have to be mapping stuff, can be, you know, again, it's a website builder. So it can be other content as well, but it's a great place to put all that stuff that's related to your project in one place.
And I can probably pull it up for you real quick. So if anybody wanted to see it. Can you guys see that by chance?
Yep.
Right, and so it's super awesome. It's a website. It's open to the public. You can make it closed so nobody can see it. I made mine open. You can insert links. So I have the volunteer sign up that goes to I volunteer. I've got links to the specialized training that will take you to the ARC story maps. You get your community ID, and that's kind of within us. And then you download your collector and or field maps, and you can kind of get started. So you could also put like warnings on here, like permits must be carried, as well as QR codes to the monthly reporting and links to that. I put updates here. Recently, we just got an update on our herbicide levels, and we can use a 50% dilution. So I put that up there. Here's kind of your interactive map. So you can kind of zoom in, zoom out, check out your different areas. where people are, you know, going, what's available to kill or not kill. You can click on those points and they come up for you. It's a pretty cool tool for volunteers. I've got a running tally of how many have been killed and how many people have detected, as well as different like connections to PDFs. I've got PDFs on here. I've got story maps. I've got JPEGs. I've got videos, which is connecting. It's refusing to connect to, but there are videos here for Q&A. So it's a really cool tool that kind of bundles everything together, and it'll just take you to different explorative pages here. So if I wanted to see the difference between Haupu'u and Angiopteris, which are the two most commonly confused plants, I would be able to go ahead and click on this, and now I'll be able to kind of study, you know, what is the anatomy of a fern and the difference between bipinnate leaves. So if anybody's interested, but yeah, it's a pretty cool tool.
Awesome. Thanks, Jenna. I don't see any more questions. Joan, any more in the chat? Oh. Okay, so with that, we're going to go ahead and wrap up this meeting. And just a reminder that we're continuing with our lunchtime brown bag series. It's roughly monthly. The February brown bag hasn't been scheduled yet, but usually they're on the 3rd or 4th week of the month. So keep an eye on your mailbox for that announcement. And again, I'll post the video of this, the recording of this meeting on our YouTube page. So I will send an email out later for that as well. So thank you all for attending today, and I hope you have a great rest of the day. And thank you again, Royce and Jenna.
Thank you.
Thanks.